How do you present yourself to build trust through online networking? If that is a question on your mind, you're in the right place to hear and answer. Hello and welcome. This is a video in my Visibility Insights Live series, and I am Sigrid de Kaste, creator of Global Business Networking Live Online. Now, I help established coaches, consultants, and experts build trusted visibility and strategic global relationships through networking that creates opportunities for growth. And I'm using my three-pillar trust building visibility system. And today I'll talk about something that I think is often misunderstood when we think about networking. And that is, or networking specifically online, and that is how we present ourselves. Because I think many people believe that presenting themselves well at an online networking event is mainly about having a good introduction, and that is absolutely so. Getting those 45, 60 seconds right is important. Telling people what you do, explaining who you help, and you've done a good job, if it's clear enough. But that is really only one part of it. Your introduction is important. In fact, I believe it is one of the most important starting points in networking. But the way you present yourself and whether people begin to trust you is created through the entire experience that people have of you in online specifically or particularly. Before you speak, while you introduce yourself, during the conversation, it is also the words that you use. It is also the interest that you show in other people and through what happens after the networking event is over. And those are points I want to explore with you today, because expertise alone does not automatically create trust. You can have a very long list of qualifications, but that alone does not create trust. And simply turning up to networking, lots of different networking opportunities, it does not automatically create trust either. Trust develops through a series of experiences that the people have with you. And by the way, that is exactly why at the heart of Global Business Networking Live Online that I offer, there is that a three-pillar trust building visibility system. Because in my experience, networking can become much more than attending meetings and meeting people. It can become a strategy for building visibility, relationships, recognition, and trust consistently over time. So today I'm going to show you the way you present yourself, how that fits into the much bigger picture. Because before you even say a word, and that would have been applied for me today, right now as well, your camera comes on, you become visible. Before you say that first single word, people are already forming an impression. That is just human nature. They see you, they see how you're dressed, they see your background, they see whether you're looking at the screen, they see whether you're engaged, whether you are smiling. Are you happy to be here? Is this something exciting for you? All of that comes through from how you look into the camera and how you are visually presented. They see whether you are clearly present in the moment, or whether you appear to be doing three other things at the same time. You might be on the phone as well, you might have a drink, you might move around and not look at the camera. I'm not suggesting that everybody needs a perfectly styled office, perfectly dressed in a certain way that is not comfortable or that is not you. I'm not saying you need professional lighting and expensive camera, anything like that. And I'm certainly not suggesting that you need to conform to someone else's idea of who you are. What I'm saying is that your visual presentation is part of the message that you are communicating. And think about, for an example, think about walking into a business meeting in person somewhere. I would venture to say that you would give some thought to how you present yourself. You walk into the room, you look at the people, you acknowledge them, and you engage with what is happening. Online networking is the same. It's no different. It's the same. The room is virtual, yes. The impression is not. And I think that's something that we sometimes forget. People sometimes don't think about. We think because we're sitting in front of a computer, many of the principles of that human interaction somehow may not exist in this environment. But that's not the case. People are still deciding, do I feel comfortable with that person? Do they, the person, seem interested? Do they seem professional? Do I want to know more? That doesn't mean that they are consciously sitting there with a checklist. Most of the time, of course, they are not, but they're simply forming an impression that is sort of a natural part of our thinking of how we look at someone else, how we take the world in, really. And of course, we are perceived differently by different people as we ourselves perceive people differently. So be yourself, absolutely be yourself, but do think about how does the yourself part look to the others and how do you want it to look? What can you make sure you are visually presenting that really shows who you are? And then comes the part that most people think about when they hear the words present yourself, and that is the introduction. That is what's most often thought of as presenting. And here's where I see one of the biggest challenges in networking online. People have an enormous amount of expertise. They've worked for years, sometimes decades. They have qualifications, experience, books, programs, ideas. And then somebody says in a networking room, tell us about who you are and what you do in 45, maybe 60 seconds. And that can stun people. Or they try to say everything like, I'm a coach, a consultant, a speaker, an author. I work with individuals and organizations, and I offer coaching, consulting, workshops, training, and programs. By the time they've finished, they've parted with a lot of information. But did the people in the room, in the Zoom room, really understand any of it? You see, the attention span in the first instance is very short. Plus, everybody in the room initially is focused on their own. What am I going to say? How am I going to say it as well? So to cut through and to be heard in that first pillar of my trust building visibility system, for example, I make sure that we go through impact introductions, because that introduction isn't supposed to tell people everything about you and what you do and where you've come from and where you're going to go. It is supposed to help people begin to understand you. And that's an enormous difference. I think an introduction, it is the place where you place that first grain of trust into the room. It's a small grain, it's a tiny one. You're not asking people to trust you completely after the 45 or 60 seconds. You're simply giving them something clear enough to remember you. Something that helps them to think, I understand what he, she does. I know who he, she helps. That is interesting. I'd like to know more. Your introduction is not the whole conversation. It is the beginning of the conversation. And clarity matters enormously here, because people cannot remember what they don't understand. They cannot talk about your expertise if they cannot explain it. And they certainly cannot recognize opportunities for you if they're still trying to work out exactly what it is you do. And this is why, for example, inside that trust building visibility system that I offer, we don't treat introductions as something that you write once and then you repeat it for the next 5 years. We work on them, we refine them, we expand them also into other areas of where and how you present yourself, where you are visible. The introduction is one small part that you offer in a live networking event, but you offer introductions also through your about page and your profile, for example, on LinkedIn, in other areas where you spell out who you are and what you do. Now, we experience how people respond to the introduction, and then we expand the introduction into many other areas of the business in the system that is at the heart of my networking, for example. So, in other words, everybody who's part of that, we learn how to talk about different aspects of our expertise clearly and memorable. Because the better people understand you, the easier it becomes for trust to develop. And here is something very different. After introductions in many networking events, often there comes a speaker, either someone from the group or someone from outside, and something is taught or talked about to you. Now, my assumption is that you already are an expert, and I'd rather hear more about you. And as you can imagine, a room full of networkers, I can't have every single one give a presentation, but here's what I can do, and here's what I've put into my particular networking. I want your expertise to be further and better understood by everyone else in the online room. And that is why I offer guided discussions, why I take my group of online networkers into guided discussions. Guided discussions are an important part of global business networking live online. A topic is introduced, and as a group, we question and discuss the topic. This is where all participants have the opportunity to share their expertise, their ideas, and their perspectives. And this is where something very important happens. People begin to see how you think. And I believe this is where trust deepens. Because you can tell me you're an expert, but when I hear you contribute thoughtfully to a conversation, I begin to experience your expertise for myself. And that is very different. Think about it in this way. Going to a dinner party. You meet somebody for the first time, they shake your hand and they say, "Hello, I'm David, I'm a leadership consultant." Fine, you got that. You move on. You know what David does. That's it for the time being, for the moment. But imagine then over dinner, a conversation develops about managing people through enormous change. David shares an interesting perspective. He tells a brief story about something he's experienced. Excuse me. He asks another person at the table a thoughtful question. He listens carefully to their answer, and later you find yourself thinking, "I really enjoyed talking to David." What happened? What changed there? His job title didn't change. His qualifications didn't change. His expertise didn't change. What changed was your experience of him. You had the opportunity to see more. And that's exactly what I see in my guided conversations, what they can do in networking, and why I offer networking in this way. The opportunity to take part in a guided conversation allows people to move beyond what they say they do, who they are, and begin for you to experience how they think, in the way how they communicate and how they interact with you and others. And this connects very strongly to the second pillar of my networking system, for example, which is visibility through others. Because visibility becomes much more powerful when other people understand you well enough to talk about you, to remember you, to mention your name. They can then think of you when an opportunity arises. But that doesn't happen because you pushed your expertise into every conversation. That type of behavior, of course, can create the opposite effect. It happens because you contributed to a conversation, everybody heard your contribution and can come to their own conclusion. And I think you'd agree that trust isn't built by being the loudest person in the room. You know, when you have that one person dominating the room, the answer that they give to every single question, they always push themselves into the forefront. They have a story for everything, an example for everything. They constantly bring the conversation back to what they do. You may leave that conversation knowing a lot about the person or a lot about the things they said, but did that build trust? Rarely, rarely. Because trust is also influenced by how we make other people feel. And this is why I believe one of the most powerful ways you can present yourself during networking is through genuine interest in other people. Listen. Yes, you're sitting there in a Zoom room, for example, online networking. You're sitting there ready to, what am I going to say? You know, where do I make my notes? What about me? But listening is the key factor here. Respond to what somebody else has actually said. Ask a question. Be curious. If someone shares an interesting experience, explore it a little further. You could be asking things like, how did that work for you? What happened next? What made you decide to do that? These aren't complicated networking techniques. They are just simple human conversations. And yet they do matter enormously. Because for me, particularly, networking is relational. We want to create a relationship with the people in the room. You're not presenting to an audience that disappears when your speech ends. You're building relationships with people. And those people are also noticing, does this person listen? Are they interested in anybody other than themselves? Do they contribute to the conversation? Do they make the room better by being part of it? Again, we're building trust with that behavior when we are curious and empathetic to the other people in the room. One small experience at a time. And here's another thought for further creation of trust. Have you ever thought of trust as a bank account? I think that's a really useful way to look at it. Imagine that every professional relationship has a trust bank account. The first time somebody sees you, perhaps you make a small deposit. You present yourself professionally, another deposit. You give a clear introduction, another deposit. You contribute something thoughtful to a discussion, another deposit. And you show genuine interest in somebody else's expertise, another deposit. You connect afterwards, after the meeting, and continue the conversation, and you make another deposit. You see, no single one of these things creates the whole relationship, creates the trust, but over time it accumulates. It accumulates recognition of you, familiarity, understanding, credibility, and trust. And this is exactly the part and of the third pillar of my trust building visibility system. Networking as a strategy, because if you attend one event, you make a good impression and then you disappear, how far can that trust develop? This is why I talk much about consistency, and it's part of building trust. Strategic networking is not simply asking, who can I meet today and will I get some business? It's asking, how am I building visibility and relationships over time? Who am I getting to know and who is getting to know me? Who understands my expertise more clearly than they did a month ago? Who am I following up with? Which conversations am I continuing? And perhaps most importantly, how am I becoming part of a network of people who increasingly understand, remember, and trust one another? And that's a very different way to look at networking, I believe. And here is one of the biggest missed opportunities in networking, and that is when the meeting ends. Networking is finished. There may have been links exchanged in the chat when you're on online networking meeting, and connection requests may have gone out, particularly here on when you're on LinkedIn, but then everybody goes back to work and they wait for the next event. They don't have time. It's always short of time for more until the next time. Well, that's what many people tell themselves, no time. But the event was only the beginning. You met somebody interesting, do connect with them and follow up. If you heard something being said, something that resonated with you, tell that person, tell them later when you have the opportunity to connect and follow up. You might have spotted a possible connection between two people. Do make the introduction. If you want to know more about someone's work, go and ask them. Have a one-on-one follow-up conversation. Follow-up is where we begin to deepen the connection and continue to build that trust and deepen it. Now, it doesn't need to be complicated. It's certainly not about, hello, we met yesterday, would you like to buy something from me? That is not what I am talking about. I'm talking about continuing a conversation, because every time we do that, we learn more about each other. And the more we understand each other's expertise, the more able we become to recognize opportunities, connections, and possibilities for one another. I've seen this happen within our own networking community and over all the time I've been networking in my time. Somebody shares what they're working on. I hear another person talk about a challenge, and suddenly I think, yep, the two should be talking. Why could I make that connection? Why can I make such a connection? Because I'd come to understand both people. And that is the power of relationships developed over time. And that's why I want the trust building visibility system to create more consistently those connections, the trust in this way. Not a room full of people collecting names, instead a network of professionals who increasingly understand one another's expertise and can recognize where conversations, connections, and opportunities may exist. So let's summarize. How do you present yourself to build trust? It's not one thing to build trust. It's the experience you create. It's how you visually enter the room. It's the clarity of your introduction. It's how you contribute to conversations. It's the interest you show in others. It's whether you continue the relationship afterwards. And it's whether you show up consistently enough for people to really get to know you. That's the bigger picture. That's why I have never looked at networking as an isolated activity. I've put my positive networking experience from all of my time in business since way back in 2002 when I started. I've put all of that into the 3-pillar trust building visibility system, which is at the heart of the Global Business Networking live online boardroom sessions. And now I invite you to connect and leave a comment. If you'd like to come networking live online with me and the community around me, come present yourself and build trust for you, around you, in you. Simply comment and I'll send you a guest pass for the next opportunity coming up.